Traditionalist Catholics accuse Pope Francis of fighting a dirty war against the Latin Mass. But is Francis whitewashing his own role in Argentina's dirty war? Here to connect those dots for us, Church Militant Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomez. Jules, Pope Francis made some pretty revealing comments in a private meeting with the Jesuits during his recent visit to Hungary. What did he discuss?
Brad, I'm standing right outside the Jesuit Generalate in Rome, down the road from St. Peter's Basilica, and Francis made these comments to Jesuits in a private meeting on his recent trip to Hungary. The script of that meeting has just been released yesterday and has been published in the oldest Jesuit journal in the world, La Civiltà Cattolica. And those comments have been the subject of fierce controversy since they were published yesterday.
Well, it's fitting that you're outside the Jesuits' headquarters there. Seems like over half your stories involve Jesuits. So what did the Pope say about trads and about these traditional Catholics, what they consider to be his dirty war against the Latin Mass?
Francis was not asked about the traditional Latin Mass. He was asked about Vatican II and how Vatican II can help Catholics relate to the modern world. In fact, the question really was, how can how can Catholics relate better to the situations around us? And he took this opportunity to shoot down the traditional Latin Mass. And traditionalists in particular, this is what he said. He said there is incredible support for what he called restorationism. And he used the term in Italian, backwardness. And then he went on to quote the letter to the Hebrews out of context. He quoted Hebrews chapter 10, verse 39, where the author of Hebrews says, "But we do not belong to those who shrink back." Now, in context, it is talking about those early Christians who were tempted to return to Judaism under fierce persecution and has nothing to do with traditionalist Catholics. He then went on to talk about going forward, and he quoted Saint Vincent of Lerins, the 5th century, sometimes regarded as a church father, from where we get this marvelous saying of what it is to be Catholic, what has always been believed everywhere, in all places, in all times. But Vincent has very strong restrictions on how we go forward. He says we do not go forward if something cannot be proved from scripture and tradition. And again, Francis quoted Vincent out of context. Francis went on to say the danger today is indietrismo, backwardness, the reaction against the modern. This is a nostalgic disease, Francis said. That is why I decided now that the permission to celebrate according to the Roman Missal of 1962 is mandatory for all new consecrated priests. He then said that what was intended purely as a temporary pastoral provision by Pope John Paul II and by Benedict XVI has been hijacked, and the traditional Latin Mass is being used as the vehicle of a resistance to the reforms of Vatican II, Brad.
Well, this, the traditional Catholics would often would respond to that, Jules, with, you don't belong to the zeitgeist either. You don't belong to the spirit of the age, and updating merely for the sake of updating or changing with the fashion or the times just for the sake of change does not bode well either. But leaving off that debate there, which has been raging for quite some time now, let's look at a little deeper also at that meeting with the Hungarian Jesuits. The term dirty war, that has an even more specific meaning in Argentina, doesn't it? Can you tell us about that war and the role that Pope Francis played in it?
And this is critical because a Jesuit embarrassed him profoundly by raising this question about the dirty war and Francis's role in it at this meeting in Hungary. Now, the dirty war refers to Argentina's most brutal reign of terror between 1976 and 1983 under the military dictatorship. The church has been accused of basically colluding with this very right-wing dictatorship when the oppressors were torturing and kidnapping priests, women, babies, etc., often accusing them of being left-wing communists. And there were two important priests who were working with the poor and who were kidnapped and, tortured by the military junta. Their names are Father Ferenc Yalix and Father Orlando Yorio. Now, Father Ferenc Yalix accused Pope Francis of betraying him. But when Francis became the Pope, Yalix changed his tune and said that Francis never did such a thing. A famous journalist, Horacio Verbitsky, has written all about this. And what has happened is Francis's response to the Jesuits has muddied the waters even further, because Francis says that the government was against me, but the records show us that Francis was silent, did not really do anything while he was Jesuit provincial general to oppose the military junta. And Brad, we know from Francis's attitudes towards governments in power, China, for example, Nicaragua, for example, that he prefers to adopt, to put it politely, a conciliatory, a non-confrontational stance with all these people. So it's difficult to assume that he was probably like Archbishop Oscar Romero, raising his voice and talking against the military junta of his day.
So let's go to that meeting in Hungary with the Jesuits. What did he tell them specifically about his relationship with the Argentinian military, the junta, during that period of time in the mid to late 70s, early 80s?
Well, basically, he said that the government wanted his head on a block, and he portrayed himself as a kind of hero of the resistance, which doesn't seem to be true at all. And this is, again, causing controversy because this matter seemed to have been laid to rest. He went on to say that the judges who had interrogated him at length saw him in the Vatican and everything is hunky-dory after that. We don't know if that's true or no. He also went on to say that the Argentine bishops have just published 2 volumes explaining what went on during that period. But, critics say that one can't take their word for it because many of them, not necessarily all, were complicit with this regime. And other scholars, historians who have written, say that Francis may not have opposed the junta or betrayed these 2 priests, but we certainly know that he was very, very silent during this time.
Okay, well, let's switch gears for a minute. Something else that came up at that meeting in Hungary. Francis said something about witnessing to the youth there.
He was asked, how does the church, how do priests deal with youth in this postmodern world? And he talked about words, but words that are consistent and words that are authentic. And what he meant was, the person who is speaking does not contradict his own words by his lifestyle. And he also talked about clarity. But again, the question is, when Francis speaks, is he consistent or does his lifestyle not match his words?
Okay, and also he talked about loving sexual abusers. Can you dial us in on that one?
He was asked, how does one deal with people who commit sexual abuse? And he was definitely hard on this issue. He said it's absolutely not to be tolerated. But he went on to say that one has to love the abuser as one loves one's enemy and provide pastoral care. There has to be punishment, but that punishment has to be accompanied by pastoral care.
So that might fly under hate the sin, but love the sinner. So this leaves us anticipating two events, Jules. Is Francis, in your estimation, ever going back to Argentina on a papal visit? And is he going to issue the much talked about diktat that will finally crush the TLM completely?
These are very good questions, Brad, and there is speculation that this question may have been planted precisely because Francis wants to clear the way for a return trip to Argentina. But has it really done what it is supposed to do, or has it made things worse? That's what we really cannot come down one way or the other on. The business about the diktat against the traditional Latin Mass, which has been speculated about, I think we were expecting the sledgehammer to come down on the 3rd of April, and it hasn't yet. But his comments to the Jesuits in Hungary makes it seem all the more likely that this is very, very much a possibility in the next couple of months or so.
Well, we know each pope does have the pontifical mojo to make such decisions, whether good or bad. And every vicar of Christ must also give an account to Christ on Judgment Day for every decision he made, as we say, for good or bad. But the response of all of us, faithful Catholics, Jules, must always be stay on the bark of Peter, regardless of who is piloting the ship. For Christ promised us that the ship will never sink. Thank you, Jules, for your insightful reporting.
Thank you, Brad.